May I call to order the Subcommittee on Issues Relating to Public Markets under the Panel on Food Safety and Environmental Hygiene. We have a quorum and it is the appointed time for the meeting. Let's get started. First, we'll ask the clerk to ask the administration to come in. While they do so, I'd like to inform you that Mr. Hon has joined the subcommittee on the 22nd of March. And on the 9th of April, Ms. Alice Mack wrote to me to say that she would withdraw from the subcommittee. This is for your information, please. Now the membership stands at 20. The administration is now coming in. I'd like to welcome the Undersecretary for Food and Health, Dr. Choi, and his team. Because of time constraint, I'm not going to introduce you one by one. Members must have received the background brief paper from the Secretariat. Also, we have received a referral arising from a meeting between Legislative Members and Sham Shui Po DC members on the 14th of July relating to the improvement of facilities and management of public markets, and this has been copied to members. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Choi Tak-yi, Undersecretary for Food and Health, to introduce the administration paper, and the floor will then be open for comments and questions. Dr. Choi. Thank you, Chairman. This is about public markets, which is an important livelihood issue. Members of the public do need to use this avenue to buy daily food, and the administration places emphasis on improving public market facilities, and therefore we are working continuously on this matter. We'd like to thank the FC for approving in January this year a 5-year supernumerary AOSGC post to head a dedicated team set up in FEHD to look at the provision of new public markets, hardware improvements to existing public markets, reform on market management, review of the rental adjustment mechanism, etc. And in February, in the budget, the government announced earmarking $2 billion for launching a 10-year Market Modernization Programme, or MMP. It will involve many projects, and we will be able to discuss them one by one later. The dedicated team has done preparatory work. The paper is the outline of the program, and it contains the principles for taking forward the project, and we are all ears to members' views. There are many markets, and therefore within 10 years we need to take a progressive approach to review the markets, the cooked food centers and cooked food markets, in order to draw up priorities and strategies. And of course we will have to keep close liaison with stakeholders throughout the process. On hardware, members, of course, are concerned about the air conditioning retrofitting. At present, 11 markets have already achieved the 80% threshold support for retrofitting AC. We hope the Taiwan market project can be submitted to the PWSC in the first half of the year, and then there are 3 more where the initial technical studies have been completed, and we believe those can also be completed for the remaining 7 markets by the end of 2019. Apart from AC retrofitting, we will also try to study into other aspects of improvement where there will be AC retrofitting. Say, for example, configuration of stalls, basic facilities improvement, and also refurbishing of lifts or toilets, and the provision of barrier-free access. And if possible, and if stakeholders give their consent, we can undertake such projects as well. A related topic is that every year we have minor works project vote in order to conduct minor works projects. And number 3, in 2015, in the consultancy market, we made proposals for improving 6 representative markets. And we are now taking up discussion with the relevant markets. And whatever can be agreed upon can also be launched in the same period. And the other topic is the building of new markets. The dedicated team will look at the siting, design, and building options, and they will look into all these aspects as well. Within the 10-year MMP, we will also pay attention to software improvement, because software is also important. We'd like to, for example, set up a new management and consultation system, and then involving the tenants more on the daily management of the markets, including cleanliness, etc. This would facilitate the public use of the markets. We hope that later on, at the subcommittee or the panel, we can take forward the discussion. This is my introduction, and I welcome questions. Thank you, Dr. Chui. Many members have shown concern about this topic. 5 members have raised their hands to speak. We have 1 hour and 55 minutes on the issue, and I will allow members 4 minutes, including a reply. If necessary, you can have a second round. We have Andrew Wan, Jonathan Ho, Shou Ka-fai, Ann Chang, and Leung Yu Chung. Also, Au Nok Hin. Andrew Wan. Thank you, Chair. I have read the paper. Well, as we said before, it gives a simple response to the present situation. But even from such a short paper, I can see that there are 5 outstanding points. It's a small livelihood issue, but then many members have criticized the issue. The first point is poor planning. You are not following the Hong Kong PSG. 2, you do not have the right policies. The policies are chaotic, and you don't know what to call these markets. Just look at the paper. You have different names for these places. You call the buildings complexes. You have Tai Wai or Tai Po complex and Aldrich Bay Surface Complex, and also Ching Yi Complex. They include markets, but then there are other complexes which do not include markets. I think you are making use of names in a quite confusing manner. Some of the buildings are still called municipal buildings. Maybe that is a legacy of the municipal council era. And the paper is therefore quite confusing. I don't think you are getting to the point. Of course, there are 138 wet markets, CFCs and CFMs. Some are older, but some have been refurbished. But if you want to make overall improvement, you must start from the policy and strategy angle. In the budget this time, there is this gesture of giving some more money. At that time, there was some misunderstanding because the FS talked about $8 billion for community complexes. That has nothing to do with markets. I hope members of the public who are watching us on TV should know that the $8 billion has nothing to do with this, but we are talking about $2 billion, including rebuilding the markets. There are 97 markets, according to the paper, that do not have AC. If AC has to be retrofitted for everyone, well, in Taiwan, there was refurbishment, and it required $100 million. And you would need $9.7 billion instead of $2 billion just for AC alone. How can you just allocate $2 billion and hope that it will be enough? How can the Bureau do magic and retrofit all markets with ACs? Dr. Chui and my colleagues will supplement. From a planning point of view, We know there are many existing problems, but we must not forget the background. At the next meeting, we will give members more information about the historical background of markets and the factors that would affect planning. The budget proposes to earmark $2 billion for 10 years. Well, it's an injection of resources, and if necessary, I'm sure we can try to secure more resources. Let's see whether my colleagues have anything to add. Mr. Wong, thank you for the question. I'd like to add one point. This is a long-standing livelihood issue. Our previous policy was to recite street hawkers into markets. That was what we did over the past decades. It depends how much space there was in the urban area for building a market and how many markets or hawkers would have to be recited. Over 60% of our markets were built before the 1990s, and we'd like to rationalize the present situation. Well, we have received from Mr. Andrew Wan a motion. I've read it, and it is related to the issue under discussion, and I have ordered that it be copied to members, and we will have to spare some time to process that motion. Next, Mr. Jonathan Ho. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to talk about AC retrofitting. Mr. David Wong and Dr. Choi commented on this at a previous panel meeting. In para 13, as you see, there are many different stakeholders. Some of them may sell vegetables and they have good business and they are well patronized.
Okay.
And the turnover is quite high. And some could be selling tofu or other groceries or rare products. So the rentals are affordable to them, but later when they have to pay for the air conditioning and also the maintenance fees, and they may not be able to pay for them. So therefore, some markets fail to reach the 85% threshold. We asked the trade association, and they told me that some vendors, well, they prefer air conditioning because they want to attract more customers. But if what they're selling are not popular, then they may not be able to afford the extra fee. If they want to make a career, they may want to stay on. But if they can't make ends meet, then they would not stay. Last time we asked the director, and they said that they may ask the users to pay for the fees. But as a service to the public, the vendors, even though there is air conditioning for them, they can enjoy it, but then the air conditioning is also for the benefit of the customers. So I wonder if you can get more people to share the air conditioning fees. So that, and if that's the case, then maybe you will have 100% support for air conditioning among the vendors at the market. So for some markets, they need to be rezoned to accommodate air conditioning. I hope that the administration can show your sincerity. If you're willing to shoulder the air conditioning costs and the maintenance fees, then I think the whole issue will be resolved more easily, and there will not be any problem with meeting the threshold. So I wonder what the administration thinks and whether you could give us a good news. Mr. Wong, AVHD. I think this is an old issue about how to deal with the recurrent expenditure. The government's policy is we will adopt the user pays principle. On the whole, whether it's the hardware or software, we want to enhance the competitiveness of markets. In terms of hardware, we will have the $2 billion pledge to have the public works project there to install air conditioning. In Taiwan market, for example, it will cost $100 million, benefiting 300 stores. So it comes to hundreds of thousands of dollars of investments for each store. As for management, in terms of operation, well, if there are losses incurred, then we need to, I think we are talking about a government department. This is not link markets. Even we are actually providing the markets as a public service. If you stick to your line of thinking, then many wet markets will not be able to meet the threshold because your considerations are different from them. As mentioned in paragraph 13, you know what happened. They used to sell vegetables and others on the streets, and they've moved to the wet markets later on. But if you charge them more for the stores, then they would have reservations, and that's why you cannot meet the 85% threshold. Can you tell us, can you promise, or see when the $2 billion will be used up? I think it will take a long time to use it up if you refuse to change your thinking. Please wait for the second round. Next one, Shiu Ka-fai. Good morning. Thank you. The $2 billion pledge for market modernization, of course, I would support it. But how you use the money, I think you need to think about it. Just then, Ho Kai-ming raised his concern. I very much support his view. Ho Kai-ming's point, I will address that later. But talking about revitalization, I think Taiwan market would very much be in need of that. Last meeting, I said that the Taiwan market, the stores that have raised various concerns. That is, when you have the construction or renovation work underway, please preserve or reserve some spaces for the vendors to continue their business and try to minimize the renovation period as well. And thirdly, in terms of the rent waiver period, would you provide them with some subsidies so they can have the rent waiver for a longer period of time? And fourthly, in terms of the air conditioning fee, you may exempt them from the air conditioning fee for 1 year. In the long run, I feel that actually the government should pay for the market fees. Back to the air conditioning fee. At public markets, many people in Hong Kong know that link markets, comparing them with public markets, well, ranks have increased the rents to a very high extent. But you cannot deny that the management is really good. And many people go to the markets because the renovation, the shopping environment at the markets are good. So you have the space. Why is it that the wet markets managed by the government are not as attractive? I think the temperature control is important. If it's too hot in the public market, then 30 years ago when I went to a market with my mom, it was like that. It was so hot. But now you would not expect people to want to go there, in such a high temperature. Not to mention people will have to sit inside for the whole day. Just then Ho Kai-ming was saying, he cited a good example. The 80% threshold is very difficult because for stores which are making profits, it's fine. But there are some old people running the stores or going to the stores, just rent a store for $1,000 a month. They may not sell products worth $30 a day, but they are there because they have nothing else to do. They just sit there at their store. Would you dare to kick them out? They're selling stuff, maybe just a string, just pieces of strings, which cost $2 each. How can they have enough profits? But these old ladies and men, they have nothing else to do. They want to stay in the store than at home. And they can't sell iPhones, right? They can't sell them. So if they cannot make much profit from their products and you ask them to pay for the air conditioning, they of course will oppose it. So that's the structural problem. And that's why you can never reach the 80% threshold. You dare not kick them out, these old store owners, right? People have said it, leave them alone, they're so old. But these people have votes. And that's why they hold off the whole project. Or if you want to, unless you want to replace them, otherwise there may not be enough support for air conditioning. And even if you decorate the wet market well, but if there's no air conditioning, people wouldn't go. So I think you really need to address this issue as raised by Mr. Ho Kai-ming. Seriously. Response? Deputy Director, thank you for your view. I think in our upcoming review, we will study the matter. One point here. Right now, wet markets are very historical, and the vendors inside normally would not go for means test. They just bid for running the stores. There is a vacant store available. We will put these stores up for bidding. And so more than half of the tenants there actually have the stores as a result of the bidding. Next one, and Chairman, I'd like to ask one thing. The $2 billion is mainly for improving public markets managed by FEHD, only those managed by FEHD, right? The problem, however, is that there are more than 100 cooked food markets, cooked food centers under FEHD. The Taiwan market alone cost $100 million for renovation. So now you only have $2 billion. How many markets can you improve? That's point one. And secondly, in 2015, you mentioned that there are 6 representative markets that needed to have their hardware improved. You have paid for 2 of them. I don't know what the progress is like. What about the 4 others? I've heard nothing about the 4 others. So what's the progress like? We all know that there are some wet markets that are really in poor condition. So we really need to improve them. And the third point is, since 2007, when you banned the keeping of cats in markets after receiving complaints, since then, there are a lot of rats found in wet markets. So I'd like to ask you, after the renovation work, would you consider finding an area for pilot program to let the tenants to keep cats? Many tenants told me that because there are no cats, they cannot have the rats caught. And if you cannot catch rats, how can you address the rodent problem? Okay, 3 questions. Deputy Director, thank you. The $2 billion is an initial pledge. We hope that we can make good use of the money as much or as fast as possible. If there are results, I'm sure that the government could allocate more money. So the most important is how to make good use of the amount. And on the works concern, well, we can engage in big or minor projects. If there's a big renovation project, it could cost more than $100 million for retrofitting air conditioning in Taiwan. If air conditioning is already enough, then that would be fine. There are also some smaller projects that could be undertaken at, for example, older markets. Some of them actually 60% of the markets have decades of history. So every 3 years, we do carry out projects worth $30 million a year to have a minor renovation work at the wet markets. For the 6 representative markets, 2 of them have got the funding already for the renovation, so we don't need to use the $2 billion. So for the 4 others, we will follow up on the improvement works there in the 10-year MMP. And we're discussing with the tenants to see which projects or markets should have the renovation first. For markets that are well renovated and how to enhance the management or how to deal with the rodent problems, we will seriously study that. Thank you for your views. Chairman, in that case, next time, can we ask the administration to tell us more, make it clear to us how they're going to modernize the wet markets and compare ours with, nearby or newer markets which are modern and where there are no rats. Can we learn? What can we learn from them? The newer markets. So you won't need to be pushed by us to catch rats. Yes, we'll try our best to do what we can. I think that's a good opinion to let them tell us more about their modernization plan. Next one, Leung Yu-chung. I'm just worried if the government continues to be rather rigid in their approach, then the chances of success with the $2 billion will be small. And it's impossible for us to get more money from the government either as time goes. For the 6 markets, for example, one of them is in my constituency. That is the one that I'm concerned with. You were lying. You said you were discussing with tenants how to revitalize the markets. But so far, I haven't heard any plan to revitalize the market of concern to me. And the tenants have asked for air conditioning installed, but they lack 2 stores to meet the 80% threshold. And yet you refuse to approve the plan. Why? Because some stores are used to store goods. Of course, those owners will not support installing air conditioning. I told your colleagues some stores are not open, but only you are used to store goods, and you paid no attention to that. So how can you succeed in the market? The Ping Fong market actually was as hot as 43 degrees one day. It was on the record. Someone even passed out because of the high temperature, and yet no one from your department responded. There's no plan for any air conditioning installation. If you remain rigid, how can you succeed? As I said, air conditioning is one thing. There are also other support measures that are needed, because you never listen to views of the public and the tenants. And, for example, in terms of the mix of goods being sold there. So how can you meet the public needs?
If you continue to work on the hardware, well, yes, it's useful, but then it will not achieve a good effect. Your consultation is not broad enough. Will you conduct more consultation to listen more to the public? Actually, many members of the public have said that if you keep them waiting, just demolish the market for other users. Even the stall holders are saying the same thing. If you still adopt calcified policies, I'm sure you're not going to succeed. I'd like to propose to you that you do some bottom-up and broad consultation, at least for these 6 markets. Don't only listen to the consultant. He interviewed me, and he interviewed my colleagues, and we felt that they knew nothing about market management. I wouldn't say that they were idiotic, but definitely they were laymen vis-à-vis management of markets. You should think about how to revitalize markets by listening to the public. Secondly, delegation of powers. Your management is a failure. We used to have the regional council, which put emphasis on the views of members and the public instead of just applying rigid policies of the administration. I have watched the market for 33 years. It was very vibrant, and now it's quite deserted. I have watched that market for 33 years. The biggest failure is your management policy. You are not meeting needs. Your staff will disturb the stallholders who lose their interest in conducting business. If you don't improve management, the $2 billion would be wasted on so-called necessary improvement measures. Deputy Director, I totally agree with Mr. Leung. The purpose of having a municipal facility is to serve the public. We hope we can provide the best avenue for buying fresh provisions. Now, how should we do it? How should we communicate with the stakeholders in the districts? That is important. Of course, it is also important to listen to the stall holders. Of course, we took up the recommendations of the consultant with the Wing Fong Street Market. We totally know that we should be flexible. This 10-year MMP would allow $1 billion to be set aside instead of going through the resource allocation exercise every year. And we have a lot of flexibility. Whenever a project becomes mature, we can dip into that money to achieve some effect. What about public consultation and also delegation of powers? I understand. Let me add. We said that $1 billion would be set aside for the hardware, but then we are also going to look at software, including management. At every market, we have a market consultative committee, including storeholders, the government representatives, etc. Now, how can we make use of the mechanism to improve management? This will be a big topic for us, and we are going to work on it. Mr. Au Nok Hin. Thank you, Chairman. I have two questions. Number one, I'd like to share with you the experience at Aberdeen Market. Stallholders want to have AC. The market committee also endorsed retrofitting AC, but at a recent DC meeting, it was said that there would be many variables. From the very start, the FEHD has not given any estimated timetable for the project. The ASD has not supplied the report or progress about the feasibility study. As you know, the ASD will have to conduct the feasibility study first, and then the FEHD will have to let the storeholders know what will be done when, so as to reassure the storeholders of the timeline. But Aberdeen Market is now in a very miserable state. Storeholders and DC members are chasing up the government. In the future, when we renovate markets, I hope you can have a better flow chart for your work. And number two, do not suddenly propose something new in the process. In the most recent DC meeting, we said that, it's already difficult to achieve a consensus for retrofitting AC in a market. And in the last meeting of the DC, as you know, there were different proposals in the FC, and suddenly the DC also proposed that apart from AC, you could refurbish the market and also rebuild the market. It was quite mind-boggling for me. The Aberdeen Market and the entire urban services complex are in the same building. So why are you proposing something new while we are already embarking on the AC project? But you said so in a district council paper. Okay, back to my first question. Can you be more mechanical in a way? Because there is already a well-established mechanism. When you consult people, you must let people know what will happen in the entire process, and please do not inject new elements in the process of a decided project. And my second question is, if you want to have a good work flow chart, first of all, you need a good policy. As I said, you give people the impression that your policies are chaotic. Say, for example, you have $2 billion now, and there will be more revitalization projects. Will there be formulae or mechanisms to tell people under what circumstances you will rebuild or refurbish or retrofit AC in a market, so people will know that you have a consistent policy? Let me also talk about the Taiwan market. I read previous minutes. It was said that specific measures were endorsed, like the distribution of ex gratia payment and also rent waiver, in order to tackle tenants' needs in the transition period. Can we not formalize such mechanism whenever a market is refurbished ex gratia payment can be distributed in a certain situation. Thank you. Undersecretary or DD, thank you for the view. Aberdeen market is one of the 11 markets which has achieved the threshold for retrofitting AC. We talked to the storeholders, but we did not talk to them just now. It was conducted a long period ago. And apart from retrofitting AC, the future management and operation of the market was also discussed so that there would be a better operating environment and the public will find it a better market. As Mr. Shield and Mr. Ho mentioned, why the management is so poor? It is because we have this historical legacy. Very often we moved street hawkers into the market. The size of the market, the size of the stalls, those are restricted. Say in Aberdeen market, it has a 40-year history. It has 300 odd stalls. Many of them sold dry goods. They only measure 30 square feet, and they cannot have any reasonable operation in the present retail environment. So retrofitting AC itself will not solve all the problems. This is an important issue, and we have been discussing it with DC members and tenants. Now, this time around, we have a windfall. We are going to have the money. Let us grasp the opportunity to work on each market, including hardware and software. We have the responsibility to take this up with members. Does it mean we should work on a market and then wait another 40 years? As you said, we might rebuild the entire building. We can, of course, look at the few stories that are under the jurisdiction of the FEHD, while the upper stories are used for sports facilities. We understand we should review the policy. However, the mainstream policy is still that we should achieve an 80% threshold for retrofitting AC, but that is already not easy to achieve. We have talked to many stakeholders before we could achieve this 1 billion MMP. If at Aberdeen market, for example, tenants are willing for the entire market to be closed off for a period of time, then we can work on it. But I hope members will understand that we need to involve many people. But I would be most willing to take up the matter with Mr. Au after the meeting to let him know our thoughts. Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you. Mr. Wong, you have good intentions. But you must be realistic. We have talked about AC for markets all these years. And the critical point is that the dry goods and wet goods storeholders have totally different ideas for the matter. And you must have understood that the majority of wet market stalls would agree to AC and the objection would come from the dry goods sellers. It is because there is a very different environment for their business. If you sell wet or dry goods, well, you can have game plans, but time is not on our side. And if you want to speed up the process, I hope the DD can think of two matters. Number one, on AC, can you adopt this strategy that dry goods and wet goods stores can be separated for treatment? The public are really looking at wet goods stalls. Please give priority to wet goods stalls. But now you are taking dry goods and wet goods sellers together when you calculate the 80% threshold. Secondly, the FEHD has been unwilling to deregulate. Well, in small markets, the stall size is 4 feet by 6 feet. But after many years of operation, the ultimate beneficiary of certain stores actually is one and the same person. We have said many times that you should deregulate for better management. If I hold 2 adjacent stores, or if 2 persons holding 2 stores are willing, they can demolish the dividing wall so that they can operate a bigger store for better business. But you are thinking of closing off the entire market to reconfigure the stores, but then you will still face the same problem, because after all, the market itself is small and it will be quite difficult for you to reconfigure the 300 odd stores. I think the most effective way is to allow store holders who are already operating together in a de facto manner, to allow them to demolish the dividing wall so that they can have a better business environment. Now they are totally divided up into very small stores. I hope you can adopt these 2 points in the MMP, and perhaps you can give us responses at the next meeting. Otherwise, we'll be just going in circles. BD? Thank you, Mr. Wu, for your observation and reminder. We agree. Dry goods and wet goods stores have a totally different ecology. And why are there so many dry goods sellers? It is because they were hawkers to start with, but 40 years have passed, just like in the Aberdeen market. Now, are the sellers still active? What is the situation about the dry goods stores? We have to consider that. And technically, if we can separate the 2 types of stores, there may be different considerations. But then, sometimes, both kinds of stores will be situated on the same floor. And then, about Aberdeen market, there are 300 odd stores. But then, sometimes a holder would operate different stores.
So there may be about 200 in total, more than 200. So we could encourage some store owners to just concentrate on one store and to try to improve their competitiveness. All these issues will be studied carefully. In Wan Chai Market, for example, the old Wan Chai Market or Wan Chai Road, it was built in 1930s and now it's been moved to Seneth. And we thought that there may not be enough to accommodate all tenants. But some made arrangements among themselves, for example, to co-run the same store, so that in the end, we have a much better market in Wan Chai. And when a store gets bigger and when there's air conditioning, the environment could be improved. We could look at all the cases and look at their own merits. So we'll see how we can, in today's retail environment, how we can try to see what sort of help we can provide to markets run by a VHD. Chairman, the Deputy Director suggests that all things are working. But of course, if you can rearrange all the stores, that would be a totally different world. But the problem is, are you going to spend the $2 billion over a long period of time? I think that's my biggest concern. If that's the case, then we may be looking at it or planning for the whole thing from scratch. That means we have not faced up to the issues. Realistically speaking, or objectively speaking, we cannot copy or have another Wan Chai market experience elsewhere. For markets that have been long in existence, we still have to deal with them. Director, yes, we would pay attention to all sorts of issues. We have big and small projects. If small projects could be done quickly in particular markets, we will still go ahead with them to try to achieve results. That's why I asked you to deregulate and be flexible, so that even for making minor changes, there could be improvements in the business environment of some markets. Thank you. Jeremy Tam next. Thank you. I think, well, after so many years, we're still talking about air conditioning. Why do we still need to stick to the 80% threshold? Since, as mentioned in the policy address, or even the chief executive herself said that they wanted to see changes, then why do we need to stick to the 80% threshold? It's all because of the air conditioning fee. But why can't you just make the air conditioning service free? Then, if that's the case, then there will be no opposition, and you won't need to have the 80% threshold. Your point is that you think that, for example, in your shopping malls, you charge management fees, and that's why you think that markets should follow the same approach. But if you are so calculative, then don't think of having bazaars, because bazaars are in public areas for people to do business. If that's unfair to the shopping malls, are you going to charge people running stores in bazaars? But that's not what you said at the Bazaar Subcommittee. So if you want to promote changes, then you should not be so calculating. And don't forget, last year, you imposed it on markets, requiring tenants to pay more rents on every year. It wasn't the case before. So, Chairman, I will have a motion that in order to promote market modernization, the air conditioning fee should be waived. Only then can there be resolutions and a stop to the disputes, because there won't be a need for 80% threshold as well. So ultimately, you need to waive the tenants the air conditioning fee. Secondly, in Shui Wall Street Market, you were concerned that for the plan to install air conditioning, but on the Tai Pai Dong floor, 4 or 3 Tai Pai Dong stores will need to be demolished to make way for the air conditioning facilities. And I asked you about any compensation, and you said that, well, the affected tenants could relocate to another wet market to carry on with their Tai Pai Dong business. But they are providing cooked food. All their kitchen utensils are embedded at the site, so it costs a lot for them to move to another wet market. And even for other cooked food centers or cooked food markets elsewhere, what is the business environment there? If the business environment there is good, then they would have moved there long ago. So it's no different from asking these affected tenants to fold their business. So if you want to promote modernization, just to install air conditioning, how modern is air conditioning? Air conditioning has been around for 50 years now, so it's nothing modern. If you want to promote it, the simplest way is to, as I said, resolve this issue of air conditioning fee. And if during the construction you have to force some tenants to relocate, then you need to provide those tenants with appropriate compensation. Deputy Director, thank you, Mr. Tam, for your views. I understand. Well, air conditioning is something normal in today's world, but is it as simple as that? Let me tell you the reality. As I said, quite a number of markets were built decades ago, and the planning back then did not, or the social standard then did not include air conditioning. Now, if we were to install it, we face technical difficulties. In Shui Wall Street, for example, there need to be space for us to install the planters and other facilities. So, and also we need to make sure the air conditioning is installed safely. So in other words, we need to find the space. One of the methods is, of course, to force some tenants to move out. We would gone for other options if there were the alternatives. So if we will have to ask some tenants to move, we will have a mechanism for providing compensation for them. So we would deal with that. You mentioned whether we waive tenants the air conditioning fee, then the whole matter can be settled. It's not as simple as that, because there are still the discussions needed on whether the air conditioning installation will cause tenants to need to stop or suspend operations for some time. So we will try to, under the $2 billion project, provide for more flexibility and give us more space to negotiate with the tenants. Okay, how are you going to use the money? How are you going to use the money? What difference will it make? You need to just work out the compensation package. Or at the next meeting, can you provide us with a paper on if there were tenants that need to be moved out? What would be your compensation package like? Please give us a paper to explain that next time. And secondly, if so many markets have the air conditioning fees paid by the government, how much would that be in terms of public money? Thank you for your view. I think the principle is just, you don't need to tell us a matter of principle. Just give us a paper, okay? I don't want to take up another member's time. I don't want to overrun. Just give us a paper on your criteria for compensation. And secondly, please work out an amount that is for all the markets. If all of them were to have their air conditioning fees paid by the government, how much would that be? Okay, that's the end of the first round. Members were active in speaking. I can arrange for a second round. Justin Jeremy Tam prepared a motion. Because it's related to the agenda, I approve the motion. So, members, please note, we need to have a quorum to deal with the motion. Okay, now is the local fund's term. You can ask your question first. Local fund. Thank you, Chairman. In the past, together with the Public Markets Alliance, I've been concerned about the matters of rents and so forth. Many colleagues have asked questions that have been not well answered by the administration throughout the years. For example, air conditioning fees and the 80% threshold. And lately, I've been to some activities in the North District. Luckily, the two markets there are air-conditioned. Even the cooked food portions or centers are installed with air conditioning. Even though the air conditioner sometimes breaks down, but at least it's air-conditioned. Last week, I went to the Hong market. Quite a lot of people go there, but then there's no air conditioning. And it's because of a lack of 80% threshold. I think the administration does need to find out why the 80% threshold is not met in other markets. There must be some reasons. For example, the impact of construction or the costs. You need to try to provide help to them to solve the issues. Would you, besides, having the money now, would you go to each of the markets to consult the tenants there and find out about the latest situation at the markets? And of course, it's best to have air conditioning. And what are the reasons for some tenants to oppose having air conditioning? Would you do that? Deputy Director, thank you for your suggestion. How long we've been? Well, in the 19 districts, the number of markets, our colleagues in various districts have been in contact with the tenant owners. After the policy address last year, after you mentioned our pledge to review the hardware in public markets, some markets took the initiative to ask us whether we would carry out a survey to find out about tenants' intentions. We carry out surveys in 4 markets, but not all met the 80% threshold. But still, we are pleased to liaise with tenants and see, not just for the policy address, but by February, now with the budget, with the $2 billion pledge. Now we have this commitment by the government to improve public markets. We will ask the tenants what kind of hardware they consider as most urgent, not just air conditioning. We are willing to discuss with them. I know many markets are very old. Yeah, you said that 4 markets contacted you, but would you, FEHD, take the initiative to contact all markets. We have the money, but if you don't use it, then it's pointless. The best is for you now with the money to, there are some long-standing issues at markets. Now you have the money. Can you go back to all the markets and carry out a survey to see whether they need air conditioning and find out why air conditioning cannot be installed? Now that you have the money, does it mean that we have a solution in sight? Can you go to all markets and gather the opinions? Thank you for suggestion. We'll consider that, because now we have a dedicated team. Our prime project is to review the 99 markets' current situation and see which ones are in need of what sorts of improvement measures. And also the stakeholders' views are our main consideration. Yes, I hope you won't just consider, but to take action. The most important is to take action. Thank you, Lau Kok-fan. As the chairman, I also have some questions. Firstly, now you've heard from the administration today and members, so I hope that you can really seriously consider members' views. Let me stress, the members sitting here today are highly representative. They have talked to the stakeholders, and I hope that the administration, after today's meeting, please, stop acting afterwards. That's how I felt, in my follow-up work on the revitalization of markets and air conditioning issues and so forth. Okay, I have several queries here. Firstly, yesterday we met with a group of representatives from the Markets Development Alliance, and they asked me to relay their questions to you. That is the Tongchong market, the Tin Shui Wai market. What is the progress like and the timetable for the development of those markets? Can you now tell us, the whole of Hong Kong, everyone here, how are you going to ensure the completion of those markets? And also, people also wonder why it's taken so long to install air conditioning in public markets. Just then you talk about the technical difficulties, but I'd like you to explain now, what is your workflow once a market has met the 80% threshold? I know several government departments are involved, the SD, EPD, and so forth.
Counting from achieving the threshold to taking the issue to technical departments to completion of installation. Now, what kind of timeline is that? We have invited the ASD here, and I hope the ASD will share with us at which point of the process are there problems, and what did you do about the problems that hold up the process? Do you just write emails? And what is the entire workflow? Number 3, members are very concerned how the $2 billion will be spent. We are not given any details today. So whether it be the Undersecretary or the DD, can you not tell us how you are going to distribute the $2 billion? We'd like to know how you are going to spend it. Thank you, Chairman, for your questions. Number 1, in October last year, in the policy address, it is said that we are going to build new markets, including for Tin Shui Wai, Tung Chung, and Hong Shui Kiu. We are working on these projects. We are actively identifying a suitable site in Tin Shui Wai, and we are going to adopt new building, design, and operation modes. We are still at the stage of site identification. Tin Shui Wai is a big place. Where should we situate the market so it will operate well? That is a very important consideration. In Tung Chung East development, we have earmarked a site near the MTR station to build a market. That is a firm promise on our side. We understand that some people think that in Tung Chung Town Center, we should consider providing a market. We are looking at the needs and also feasibility, and we are taking up the issue with departments. But as you know, it is not easy to find a site in a developed area to build a market. But we can actively consider providing a market in Tung Chung Town Center. As to how the $2 billion can be spent, well, we have said something in the paper. As I said, if there are projects that are mature, and if the return is going to be very good, we can even embark on a rebuilding project so that we can bring in fundamental changes. Or if we only retrofit AC, we should also do it because some markets have already reached the threshold. And then there can also be small-scale improvement works. And we want to do these for markets which urgently need them, as Mr. Wu was saying. Therefore, our team is now reviewing the situation in the markets. Can I now defer to the ASD to tell members about their technical consideration for retrofitting AC? Mr. Zhang of ASD. Chairman, let me tell you what problems we may face when we retrofit AC in markets. This is Mr. Chair from ASD. Well, it depends whether there are EMSD and also electricity supply and facilities. If we need to install plant room or transformer rooms, we'd like to know whether there is space for these in the market. We need to have the consent of stakeholders and stallholders, but we also have to consider the structure of the building to see whether they can support new electricity facilities and also whether the electricity companies will agree to where the transformer rooms are situated. And then we'll also have to give overall consideration to the configuration of the market as a whole. We have had experience where in certain projects we had to spend time on studying what options to adopt. We have taken stock of our experience. We will work in tandem with the FEHD and involve stakeholders, including stallholders at the early stage, so that we can look at viable options from a very early stage instead of wasting time on options that eventually will not work. My proposal is for the Bureau and the FEHD to supplement information after the meeting, and that is the new markets for Tin Shui Wai Tong Chung and Hong Shui Q. Let us know the progress for these projects. You said it very well. You said that you are still looking for a site, but let us have the timetable and route map. We need such information for the 3 markets. And then the ASD, please do not give such a simple response. After communicating with the FEHD, I hope you will give us a paper charting the workflow for retrofitting AC, because many members of the public are getting impatient. They are saying, what is the problem? Why it takes so long? They think that you are working behind closed doors. So let us have a very clear workflow telling us from incubation of the idea to consideration of options to installation. It seems different government departments are passing the buck around. I hope members will agree with me that we require the departments to write that homework for us. Do you agree, members? If there is no objection, you will have to do the follow-up. Well, since we have time, I will allow a second round, so members can ask more questions. There are 3. Andrew Wen, Au Nok Hin, and Shiu Ka Fai. Andrew Wen. Thank you, Chairman. 4 minutes, all right? Yes, thank you. On AC and hardware improvement, I agree with all members have said. I think the present policy is quite calcified and is not meeting needs. We see that there are many problems that are lagging, projects that are lagging behind because you say there is no consensus. But then, as you can see, I have another motion that has been tabled. I think that is the core issue, and that is you do not have the vision. You do not have an overall policy for markets and also complexes. That is why you seem to be quite haphazard in your approach. Well, I can compliment you about Tong Chung and Tin Shui Wai because at least people have been crying out for a market, and yet there is a lack of markets. and then different political parties have been chasing you up, and now in the end, you are building these markets. But even so, according to the old Hong Kong PSG, Tung Chung warrants 1.5 markets in addition to the present one which has been planned, and Tung Chung will receive more population in the future. Therefore, I think we are just marking time, but I will submit the motion again. I hope you will support me. Now, I come to my question. Does the Bureau or the department have a list of targets for renovation and AC retrofitting? Well, it is quite complicated if there is a government complex building including a market, because the LCSD and other departments are involved. But can you tell me whether indeed there is such a list? And if there is, will you write up a unified default policy instead of calling these facilities different names? Sometimes you call them market complexes or urban complexes. Can you not formalize the naming of these facilities? So first of all, will you have default naming of facilities? And two, whether you have a target list. If you say there is none, I would challenge you. Why the FS proposes $2 billion? Because it must have come from something. You must have some targets in mind. We are not talking about 2 billion euros, but Hong Kong dollars, and you are talking about renovating 97 markets without AC, and is not hardly a sufficient sum. And also, do you have a target list for redevelopment? Because you are saying we lack land and you want to put the land to the maximum use. Well, I agree with some members that if you can renovate and the problem will go away, then you do not need to redevelop. However, some markets are only two stories high, and yet you are not maximizing the use of the land. So perhaps you should redevelop them so that you can allow more departments to use the resultant building. Didi? Well, Mr. Wen's questions may not be fully answered by the Bureau or the department, but for myself, we do not have a list. Why do we have $2 billion? I was trying to explain that this is the first injection by government for MMP. So we do not have to go through the calcified process of RAE year after year. And this will help make sure that mature projects can go ahead. And then after we have exhausted the sum, we can still continue to have money. Therefore, this is an initial kind of commitment. My colleagues are reviewing the 99 markets to see what can be done for which market, whether redevelopment, renovation, or retrofitting of AC. We are trying our best to make the best use of the $2 billion as soon as possible, and then we can see the results, and we can follow up with other markets. Well, Chairman, if this was not said in the council chamber, you would find it quite reasonable if this is within a chat in a Chinese restaurant. But no, we are talking about financial planning of the FS. If I understand you, it means it is just a haphazard approach by the FS. It could be 2 billion or 1 billion or even 5 billion, and that would be outrageous for a government. You must have a plan in mind before you put the figure at 2 billion. I cannot accept your answer because this will only be enough for 3 markets if it is redevelopment and only retrofitting of AC for 20 markets. You say you would be filling the stones to cross the river. Now, of course, but we have a surplus of over $1,000 billion, and we are talking about policy planning. Why did you come up with this figure? Because it's a small sum. We are all surprised. Members are telling you that you are not going to be able to achieve much, and yet you say, let's get started and then afterwards we can apply for another sum. How can we conduct a meeting like this? Well, let me say this. I don't think this discussion will be fruitful if that is the answer from the DD. I think we should really look at how the $2 billion can be spent. You have been saying that you can conduct projects if they are mature regardless of their size. It means you have no specific plan. This should not be just a talking shop. So Undersecretary or DD, you should go back and think about this and let us know how you are going to spend the $2 billion next time. What is the percentage will be spent on redevelopment or greening or on retrofitting of AC? You must be specific, so members will understand what you are trying to do, or else we would be wasting time. Mr. Wen also mentioned the Hong Kong PSG. I can promise you that later on we should be able to discuss it, because if we don't address the problem, we will not be able to address other problems. Therefore, I agree with you that I hope the departments will also understand that if you are here, we don't want this to be a talking shop and we really want to achieve something. Mr. Au Nok Hin. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to make a proposal. I have been following the discussion, and we all know that $2 billion will not just help us take care of 97 markets, but at least now you have $2 billion. Maybe you have more later. Let us say you have $2 billion. And summarizing this discussion, you can categorize the projects: renovation, redevelopment, and retrofitting of AC, and also maybe putting the market to other uses. After this meeting, you have heard many views, and you have to chart your way forward for taking care of these 4 options. First, you must be district-based, meaning that, like what Mr. Andrew Wen said in his motion, you should go to the district councils.
Well, I happen to be district councillor, and I believe that district councils are politically responsible for dealing with the direction of wet markets in their own districts. So you don't need to be fixated with the threshold matter. So once district councils have decided on the direction of the wet markets, then that will inform your decision to actually work on the 90-plus markets. And then you can work out the roadmaps. As I said, what I see is that, for example, in the Aberdeen wet market, people want air conditioning, and then you have the feasibility study and the timetable. Once you have worked on one market and the experience can be drawn upon to decide on the projects for other markets, and that will make the tenants feel more at ease. You need to give people various options. For example, I won't say I'm very familiar with Eastern District. Shu Kao Fai can supplement. Shao Kei Wan wet market, the tenancy ratio is low, so you may need to think of other methods. So you need to listen to the view of the district council. And then, based on your experience, you can see what to do next, the way forward. That's a feasible suggestion to me, but I don't know what the Deputy Director thinks. Thank you, Mr. Au, for your views. We understand your views, and district councillors would know what is needed. And Shao Kei Wan market, I know that the patronage rate there is very low. I know we've closed it, as you said. The 4th option is to use the site for other purposes, because urban land is so scarce. There could be other uses that the market site could be used for. We need to deal with that. That's one thing. I understand your views, and I hope that we need to work out what to do, and we'll try to compile or consolidate information for our future discussion. I don't mean to lack details, but we don't want to be stuck to a framework. We want flexibility, but how can we give you an ideas of our directions in relation to making good use of the $2 million? That's our responsibility. We're trying to do what we can. Thank you. Shuka Fai, next. Chairman, well, you mentioned about empty talk. I think that's correct. Mr. Wong, well, I've been at a meeting with you for many times. I know that managing so many markets is no easy task. And you need to explain to LegCo, and the government now has given you this $2 billion responsibility. And I've been at the meeting for so long. All members have told you one thing: the air conditioning issue has to be resolved first. At the meeting, I know Mr. Wong is tough, trying to explain government policies to us. But do you know that your paper today, the theme is, what is it called? It's called Market Modernization Programme. Market modernization. Modernization. I haven't even talked about Alipay and so forth, payment methods and so forth. I did not mention that. Just then Jeremy Tam, our pilot colleague, mentioned that, if there's no, we're talking about Hong Kong, not northeastern China. We all know how hot it is in the summer in Hong Kong. So spare us the joke. How can you not have air conditioning in the market when you talk about modernization? Chairman, you said that, they owe us really an explanation. If you can't sort out the air conditioning issue, how can you get people to get there? The meat, the beef, or pork, when there's no air-conditioned market, then the meat would change in color because the temperature is so high inside. So you need to be realistic. I understand from your perspective, you may say you don't have the money, but the Undersecretary is here. You may talk to Professor Chan and Mrs. Lam. I think this could be another positive policy after the $2 transport concession. Not just unanimous view here in LegCo. When it comes to livelihood issues, we are on the same boat. We have talked about it for so long. Linked. People are crying over, even people who are not in the business sector, cry over, the influence of linked. And we don't have land, and yet we cannot control linked. And what we can do to counter link is to make good use of our markets. We have the land, but what happens? Well, the shops have to close. Lok Hin was asking me just then about the wet market in Eastern District. Not just that, but in Quarry Bay, look at the Quarry Bay market. It's going to fold because there's no air conditioning in the 3-story market. Well, Deputy Director, I know you're not looking at me, but you're listening. It's a sign of disrespect, of you not looking at me. But, of course, I'm blaming you. Chairman, let's organize a hearing, public hearing. If you think that LegCo members are not powerful enough, get all the people in Hong Kong to come to the hearing and see who would support our view. The government has money. It's a joke. We have surplus of more than $100 billion, and we are scratching our head how to use up all the money. There are libraries, playgrounds, sports centers, which are all air-conditioned. You can switch off the air conditioning in winter time. You don't have to turn it on the whole year. But on a summer day, temperatures of more than 30 degrees, so how can you not have air conditioning? Let's have an open hearing held. Okay, I'm going to deal with the two motions. I've received a motion from request from Shuka Fai on organizing a hearing, so we'll deal with that in one go. And Chang, thank you, Chairman. I think we must have a public hearing. I was at another meeting this morning, but Many tenants at wet markets are so concerned about this topic. How we're going to use the $2 billion and the improvements, progress of improvements to wet markets. And they want to air their views. Hong Market asked me whether, asked me when the air conditioning will be installed, and also the quicker the better. And if you cannot do it quickly, then can we have some machines or air cooling machines put there first as a remedy, short-term remedy? So please look into it. And also the air conditioning fees, maintenance fees, all these, you can actually, even before tenders are invited, you should have shouldered the costs, and you should not ask the tenants to pay or to share the costs, because tenants do not support paying for the maintenance. Particularly in public areas, they feel that it should be the government who's shouldering the bill. And Po On Road Market, they have air cooling machines, but the machine doesn't work. So can you improve that? And they also said that, how about water dripping from pipes, dripping from the ceiling? And for stores selling dry goods, the goods got wet. For people selling fruits, for example, if you have water dripping from the ceiling or dirty water dripped onto the fruits, then the fruits would become rotten. So often they need to cover the fruits with plastic cloth, but then that would cause the fruit to rot as well. So they've kept complaining. Also, toilets. As the place selling foods, they said that the toilets always have blocked drains and water seepage. I think this afternoon I need to set a time with you to really go and have a look at the wet markets where the environment is really bad. Bay Hall Street Market also told me that they find that you always have a lot of maintenance works, but they're not functioning. They think that the government should improve on the maintenance as soon as possible. And they also said that the Bay Hall Street wet market, we all know, in Hong Kong, not to mention the whole Hong Kong, in Kowloon West, Bay Hall Street is famous for selling cheap goods. If the air conditioning fees, they have to be shared by the tenants, then the prices of the goods would have to go up consequently. So you need to think carefully, whether if they don't want to pay the cost, then can you install or put in place air cooling machines that can help lower the temperature too. The hottest days of the year, that may not be much useful, but still it could help improve the temperature. So please think about the suggestions. Deputy Director, any response? Thank you, Mr. Xiu and Nan Chiang, for your views. We will consider them. Yes. Okay, all taken on board. I think members are highly concerned about the follow-up work on wet markets. I personally can see that there's really a lot of areas that the department and bureau could look into, including the hardware and the software, the rental policies, and also holistic planning and so forth, and also how to deal with or make arrangements that are needed at different markets. All along as I was chairing this meeting, many people have, through WhatsApp and WeChat, told me, particularly asked me about Ao Tao Gok wet market, Shui Wo Street market, Ao Chi Wan wet market, what is happening to them. We may not be able to have detailed discussion on it, but I agree. I hope that the Bureau and the Department can give us a detailed paper later on to this subcommittee, so we know better what's happening in the individual markets. And I hope that please go back and look at your overall strategy, planning strategy, and strategy for operating the markets, including inviting tenders, rental policies, and also software management planning, hardware, installing air conditioning and enhancing the environment and to encourage patronage of the markets, even redevelopment and revitalization of the markets. Please tell us in a paper, how are you going to make good use of the $2 billion? Anne Chang? Okay, hearing. Okay, I'm going to deal with the public hearing before we talk about that. Andrew Wan has a question. Okay, can you ask a question now? Okay, just one point. Yes, you're right, Chairman. Many people are monitoring this meeting, and some residents asked us to get a clarification. I was talking to the Deputy Director, but to many members of the public, they said that this is a policy issue. Why is it that the Bureau seems to be hiding? I want to say that this is a policy issue. If you expect colleagues responsible for management to answer all questions, that's a bit unfair to them. No matter what, we need to deal with the matter, and residents have asked us. After the 2 municipal councils were disbanded, the government has not built new markets. So all the markets date back to the pre-municipal council era. So this is an issue involving several bureaus. As I said, talking about the development of complexes, they have a longer history. So I hope that the Bureau would not just ask the department to answer all the questions. There are things that are within the control of the Bureau itself. So any supplements from the Undersecretary? Yes. Thank you, members, for your views. Policy issues, as I said, and we talk about the changes over time. So management of some wet markets, actually with the responsibility of different bureaus at different times.
Whatever is within the jurisdiction of the Bureau will certainly be taken care of. But if there are things that involve other bureaus, of course, we will take up issues with them. Whether we're talking about the use of the $2 billion or the information required by members, we will do follow-up work. Okay, thank you, Undersecretary. I hope you will take this back. Just now, Mr. Shukafai and Mr. An Chang have requested to hold a hearing. I don't think there is any objection, but I hope we can fix a date and also decide on the content of the hearing with the Bureau and Department after the meeting, because we don't want to downplay the function of the subcommittee if only one or two issues are taken up. I promise you I'll take up the issue with the Bureau and the clerk. Ms. An Chang, last time we also held a hearing. It was a few years ago. That was about market rental. This time around, we are talking about improvement of facilities. I think we should just focus on that point, because we have a lot of views on this. I think the earlier the better. And then, Chairman, you can select a few markets for the Bureau and the Department to conduct site visits with us. Well, I think you officials are not those who buy fresh provisions in the market. Maybe I can take you to the markets myself. Okay, I promise you I will go back and take care of this. Now we need to process the two motions from members. But Dr. K.K. Kwok, you'd like to say something? Well, yes. Sorry, Chairman. I was listening into the meeting upstairs. Please forgive me if I am repeating certain points. Undersecretary and DD, you can see that members don't mind you having $2 billion, but there is no direction for spending it. And next time, Chairman, they should do two things. You should not try to cheat us with the $2 billion, you must give us a list as to how it will be spent. Don't tell us that $2 billion will only be enough for 5 markets. We would not allow you to pull wool over our eyes. Well, it may have nothing to do with you. Maybe the FS is happy only to give you $2 billion, and then we can turn our attention to the FS to ask him why he has given such a meager sum. So don't worry, you just have to give us a list. Secondly, there are many more things that can be done before AC retrofitting. Chairman, you will know that many markets are already, market holders are installing fans, electric fans for their stores. You know, it's so stuffy in the summer. Perhaps you can also have different types of electric fans installed in the market. Do this immediately before air conditioning is installed. If you embark on it now, you can complete it in July. I hope they will also answer this point next time, where you can provide ventilation machines or electric fans. Now, if you don't have enough money, our subcommittee can move a motion to regret the administration for not giving them enough money. Okay, Undersecretary and DD, can you go back and think about this? Do you want to respond to Dr. Kwok? DD or Undersecretary? We thank Dr. Kwok for the views, and we will respond next time. No, I want a checklist. Please, come clean. Let us know how you are going to spend the $2 billion. Well, I have already asked them to do the homework. Okay, let us now deal with the motions from Andrew Wan and Jeremy Tam. We have a quorum in the meeting. First of all, Mr. Andrew Wan, can you read out your motion? Well, it has been tabled. Well, if you want me to, I can read it out. Well, but if members have understood it after reading it, let us now process the motion. Those in favor, hands up. Unanimous. No objection. No abstention. Mr. Andrew Wan's motion is carried. Next motion by Mr. Jeremy Tam. As you can see, we have tabled the motion. Again, we can now put it to the vote. Those in favor of Jeremy Tam's motion, hands up. It's the same thing, unanimous. No objection, no abstention. The motion is passed. I will ask the clerk to pass these two motions to the relevant bureaus and departments for responses. That completes our discussion of this item. Next item, AOB. Anything under AOB, please? If not, yes. Ms. N. Chang, Chairman. Will our subcommittee pay site visits to successful markets in certain districts? As you have heard just now, we need to modernize our markets. How should we do it? Let's not talk about $2 billion. We might even need $4 billion, and we can ask for that in the next year. Would you consider paying site visits to successful markets? Great, an excellent proposal. We can talk to the clerk and the administration. Maybe we can go overseas to take a look. Well, members, you have asked many questions today. Well, we'll ask the Bureau and the department to go back and do their homework. Well, I hope we can give them more time, and I will inform you of the date of the next meeting later. The objective is to ask them to complete their homework by June. And if there is nothing else, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you for attending the meeting. Thank you very much.